Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order. It's a policy meeting. We will start with any announcements or communications. Dr. Yanni?
There are no announcements this evening.
Okay. Did the members of the committee have time to look at the minutes? Minutes are good? Minutes are good? Okay. All right, so we will move the minutes forward to legislative. And we will move on to first readings.
So we have all first readings this evening. The first is Board Operating Guideline 005, Organization. Other than a few stylistic changes throughout the document, I know Mr. Sirota worked on some changes for section, I believe it was section 10, correct, Mr. Sirota? 10, so do you want to speak to the changes?
I figure we should let members of the committee.
I forgot. I forgot you're not on the committee.
Okay. Anything? No? Over here. Jenna, go ahead.
Okay, so I had a question about 2B, where we give notice to board members by mail 5 days before the organization meeting. Do we do it by mail? Well, email would be fine. Yeah, we don't do snail mail though, right?
No, so I have that stricken here.
Okay, got it.
So we can say, the board secretary shall give notice of the time and place of the organization meeting to all board members at least 5 days
Perfect,
before
yep.
the proposed meeting.
I think
yeah.
there is language about this in school code. I'm trying to pull it up now and see if it actually says by mail, but
I spoke with Mr. Diazio and I looked, because there was some change in there was language in the omnibus bill about how things have to be advertised. I think as long as we say notification, we're covered.
Okay.
I have another one. So kind of below that in section 3A, not that I expect to have to go to this level, but, that it kind of says, well, if the board secretary isn't here, then, we go to the assistant secretary. And then in the assistant secretary's absence, the senior board member present. How do we determine that? Because I assume it's based on tenure, but we could have people who are, well, yes. I mean, we'll call it the art rule for now, but I mean, so you could have a situation where, there's two most senior because they were elected at the same time. So I don't know how we address that, but again, really minor because I would not expect to need this clause, but it's in there, so I gotta.
I think we can say a senior board member at the discretion of the board.
I just asked Ms. Janet Evans a question. Is this because you had more votes and you're just trying to, you want to do it by that, the 9 more vote rule? Is that what that is?
You went there.
There is actually, and I don't remember what it's about, there is some rule somewhere in school code that when something like this comes up, and I don't think it's around this particular question, but something like this comes up, it has something to do with whoever has the lower social security number or something. It's in there somewhere. It might be higher social security number. I think it's social security number, though. I remember seeing it. I don't remember. So there might actually be a definition of most senior already that exists.
Perfect, yeah. So maybe we should just check if that,
yeah.
as long as there's a way to figure out who it is, I don't care what it is, because again, it's so unlikely that we ever have to go to that level, but
Well,
when
yeah,
I read it, I was like, what do you do?
Having to share social security number in the first
That's what
place is
I'm
a little
thinking.
odd.
Sharing our-
But it's in there somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
It might have something to do with the election. That's something to do with election code, I think, maybe? I don't remember. We'll find it. Yeah.
A procedural question. So the change we're going to make for elections to give the options of voice vote, roll call, or written ballot at the discretion of the board, how's that going to happen? Would that have to be by a motion, like in advance or something? Because, I mean, the way I read the original language, it was the normal practice unless the board opted for a written ballot. Now we have options, but I just want to figure out how that's going to happen if we change it. Does that make sense as a question? I mean,
I had the
And
same
for
question.
some boards in the state, that could be a very serious question.
Yeah,
to how they
it could be
do
very
that.
contentious.
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
I mean, does there have to be a motion and a vote then? But if the board hasn't been reorganized, it would be the old board, I guess, right? So should it be at the discretion of the temporary president for president, and then at the discretion of the president for vice president? I'm talking out loud here,
Well,
really.
there is, in most cases, a board. It's not a 9-member board, but there's a board at this point. At the point that this happens, they could have a vote. But if you're having a vote, yeah, it does seem like it would have to be a motion and all that, which isn't really contemplated in the organization meeting structure normally. So is there a reason why we're providing flexibility here and not just specifying one of the three?
Sometimes you just need a voice vote if there's only one person running. You don't need a written.
I mean, we can keep it as it is, but if we're going to say written ballot, then we should
Always do.
always do a written ballot.
You don't need to.
Well, I'm okay with language like a written ballot unless there's just only a single candidate. But it does seem like in the case of those contentious things, and we do want this policy to protect against it, we know that doesn't normally happen here, but it could. A written ballot just seems safest.
So then we'll keep it as a written ballot unless there's only one candidate for a position,
In which case, a roll call,
a roll call.
yeah.
But if it's roll call, then we have to do a roll call. Then it can't just be everybody in favor, just so that we're clear, whatever we write down, we actually do.
Well,
Or
I
it can
mean,
just be always be roll call, too.
that's
I mean,
exactly
yeah,
what I was just going to say, because that's not very difficult to do. There's only 9 of us, and then I think, I
So
don't
just
see
keep it as
much.
just a roll call vote for all of them?
That's what I would do. That's where I'm at.
Art says no.
If there's more than one person running for a position?
It can still be a roll
No,
call.
I think it should be a paper ballot.
But when you do a paper ballot, you still say who the person was, so why not just do a
Yeah,
roll call?
but it's not in order. Like, you can't react to what the previous 7 people have said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a good point.
we've had
Yeah,
that.
yeah. that's
So
true.
we're going to keep it at written ballot
written or
unless
roll.
there's only,
One person.
unless there's only one person.
Anything else?
I do have some.
Go ahead, Mark.
So under bullet 1F, it says, "No commissioned officer or professional employee of the board shall serve as an officer of the board." But aren't our secretary and treasurer employees? It's not new language.
Say that again?
So under bullet 1F, it says, "No commissioned officer or professional employee of the board shall serve temporarily or permanently as an officer of the board." But our secretary and treasurer, and most boards, are traditionally employees of the board.
The important word there is professional staff. We're not considered professional staff.
Oh, professional, sorry, you're right. Gotcha. Okay. Let's see, bullets 3, 4, 5, and 6. From order, election of president, election of vice president, and election of other officers, I think are all really supposed to be sub-bullets of 2. They're all part of the organization meeting, right? Bullets 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Said 3 should be under 2.
3, 4, 5, and 6 should all be under 2,
Oh, he's saying.
I think. I mean, now that I love that we're numbering everything and that we're doing a hierarchical structure, we should do it properly and take advantage of it where we can here.
I'm not vehemently opposed to that. My only concern would be it makes 2 awful long, and is it better to have subheadings to call it out, just so if somebody needs to refer to the election
Well,
of the
they'd be
president?
2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D.
Oh, keep the headings, you mean, just,
Yeah. Just basically tab them in,
I'm indifferent.
whatever it is, yeah.
Any?
If we're going to start dividing things by letters, you've already got a 2A, B, and C, so now what are you going to do, 2 Roman numeral 1?
So there are 2D, D1, D2, D3, and D4.
And then you got-
Romanettes, remember, Romanettes, that's what they're called.
Romanettes. And then under that, they have
gotta-
sub-bullets even under that. I mean, it's
Yeah,
kind of
so
deep.
The sub-bullets have to become
Yeah.
numbers then, right?
Yeah. It ends up being kind of deep, but I don't see that being a problem.
It's cutting edge stuff.
Unless you change to somehow, so it's not,
It's a first reading. I mean, we can look at this and figure out how to structure it. But it just seems like that's all part of the organization meeting, and so the whole organization meeting section should be in one section. Let's table it and we'll see what we come back with for second reading. Is that, we don't need to figure it out right
okay?
now.
Everyone okay with that? Okay. What else you got?
Bullet number 9 says prior to July 1. Is that for the following year or for the current year? I think it needs clarity. I mean, I think we mean for the following year, but it doesn't say so. And then I shared with the board, with the committee already online, but I'll do it here for the purpose of doing it in public. I think there's some changes to section 10 that are needed, 4 particular changes. One is that right now it says the president may appoint members to committees, and I think it should be shall. That's in the last bullet. Right now it says that the president is responsible for appointing members to standing committees, but I think we really mean all committees. Right now, it says that all committees need a vice chair, and I think we only mean standing committees. And it says that members of standing committees serve for 1 year, but they're not, that year doesn't necessarily start immediately at the organization meeting. So I think we really mean that it's either until the next organization meeting or possibly until the new committees are defined, but that's hard to phrase. So I would just say the next organization meeting. And I submitted sort of a reordering that makes all of that work online. Those are the only intended changes I made, but I would appreciate it if those who are reading those make sure that I didn't make any unintended changes in the process.
Any comments on Mark's comments? All right, we're okay with them. We'll move that forward. Anything else?
That's all I got.
Okay. So we'll keep working on that one. And we'll move on to the next first reading.
So the next first reading is student expression and distribution and posting of materials. I did add a definition because we talk about protected and non-protected expression. I don't think we need a definition of both because one is the opposite of the other. So I added a definition for protected expression that appears in policies of our peer districts. And it reads, expression that does not materially and substantially interfere with the educational process, threaten serious harm to the school or community, encourage unlawful activity, or interfere with another individual's rights. That language, although it sounds cumbersome, that is a true definition. And one of the things, when you read articles about the threshold of materially and substantially affecting the educational process, it's a high threshold, and it's a threshold that is usually fought out in front of a judge. But I did think it was important to have a definition of protected expression. Other than that, there are a couple instances throughout this policy and others where we did not change board to district. So Ms. Evans, when she takes care of all of these changes, she'll make sure that that's changed as well. If you go to Romanet 7, then what's the number under a Romanet? Is there a fancy name for that too?
No.
Okay. Libel is used one time in the policy. So at a previous meeting, we talked about if something is only used once in a policy, we actually define it right there. So libel, as defined as published false statements that are damaging to a person's reputation, define that right there in the policy. And then Mr. Wallach had a question about, under Romanet 7 as well, number 8, spontaneous student expression, which is otherwise protected speech, is not prohibited by this section. I'm not sure if we need that language there or not, so happy to get feedback on that.
Can you ask that question again, please, in other words?
So number 8, actually, Mr. Wallach, do you want to explain your thinking around number 8 under Romanet 7?
So it kind of came from two perspectives. The first is where it sits now as number 8 under Romanet 7. Romanet 7 says unprotected expressions include. And so my first blush, I thought it doesn't really belong there because it's not an unprotected expression. It's talking about protected speech. So it either should be its own section or perhaps a standalone sentence. But as Dr. Yanni said, the more I thought about it, if we're defining what is protected, do we really need a sentence that talks about expression that's otherwise protected, not being prohibited, because it's either in the bucket or it's out of the bucket? And so I think I've come around to, do we really need that sentence at all? But if we decide we do need it, I think it's got to be put someplace else.
So I'll chime in here if that's okay. So yeah, I mean, if you look up in Romanet 7, so, district reserves the right to designate and prohibit manifestations of student expression that are not protected by the right of free expression. So I guess kind of to your point, given that we've already sort of excluded above speech which is otherwise protected, I'm not sure if we do need it. It doesn't hurt anything. I don't mind having it there, but I'm not sure it's absolutely needed.
When it's there,
Yeah.
It's kind of a tautology, right? I mean, it says if it's protected speech, it's not prohibited. I mean, I feel like there's pretty much no value in saying that. It just is. But
Kind of where I am.
But somebody felt the need to put it there for some reason. I don't know what that reason was.
But if we can't come up with one, I know, I just worry that if we have phrases like that in the policy, it can get confusing in a real sense. So I would advocate that we just take it out unless somebody has a strong opposition to that.
we're okay with that? Okay. I do have a question in the same section about number 5, under Romanet 7. Did I say that right? Okay. Solicit funds for non-school organizations or institutions when such solicitations have not been approved by the board. So I am unclear. Okay, let's just say it's Girl Scout cookies. They're not allowed to hang up information about Girl Scout cookies, or they're not allowed to sell Girl Scout cookies, or both?
Well, what I would like to do is say that has been approved by the principal or designee or district, because that does provide for some room, because we wouldn't bring the Girl Scouts, for example, to the board for approval. So I think if we make it district or principal or designee, that allows those things to happen.
But is it the posting about it, or is it the actual selling, or is it both?
It would be both. It would be both. It would be putting something up or actually selling.
They just need permission.
Right.
It's not that
Right.
they can't do it. Okay. Any comments on
Well,
that?
isn't there already language in here somewhere? I'm trying to find it. I think it's in the 7 dots, or what is this? 3.c.i.1, sub Romanet 1. They have to submit for review, and it has to be approved by somebody. Where's the part where it says who it has to approve it? It's this whole section, I think. If it's approved by this, as designated in this policy, then it's approved. I mean, I feel it's a little bit similar to the previous question.
Right, C, distribution of non-school materials would take care of that.
So I feel like the sub-bullet 5 that you're asking about that have not been approved as, as per this policy, as opposed to by the board. But that sub-bullet 5 is specifically about soliciting funds. It's not about the posting, but the posting is in the materials, is in sub-bullet C. So I guess there could be soliciting funds without posting of materials that maybe this bullet covers.
Right, because if we read this literally, so A is student expression. B is unprotected expression. C is really distribution of non-school materials. So this would be like a Girl Scout passing out the Girl Scout flyers. I like the lemon cookies, by the way, if anyone's interested. I'm not suggesting that we should distribute non-school.
Can't sell them yet.
Can't sell them yet.
Hasn't been approved.
By the Girl Scouts either.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. I actually think, now that we've talked that through, I think the way it's worded in 5 is correct, because this is talking specifically about the soliciting of funds without potentially posting of materials. So it would have to be approved by some. So if a Girl Scout wants to sell cookies in school, do they need to get some kind of approval? How do they get that approval?
They would ask the principal,
Okay, so.
principal or designate.
Not been approved by the principal or designee.
Right.
And that belongs in this, so this policy, student expression / distribution and posting of materials. That, like, funds, money, I don't know. I was reading this more as like what they're allowed to put up on the bulletin boards. But it's bigger than that. It's going to include, okay.
And if we have a different thought when we bring it back for second reading, I think we can talk about it more then, but.
And this isn't about the collecting money, this is about the solicitation. So this is potentially verbal. There's probably other policy that covers
I need that in bold.
the money part.
Jenna, do you want to add something?
Well, I had some comments on some other sections.
Okay.
So if we good on that? Okay. All right. Let's do 3A, Romanet 7-1. So the libel, this is, should we actually broaden this to defamation? I mean, libel is only written. Defamation is both spoken and written. So that'd probably be my suggestion. 3A, Romanet 7-1. Yeah. I just want to say Romanet a couple more times. So are we okay with expanding that to defamatory, not just libel?
Yeah, I was curious about that too, because this section is about student expression, period, not specifically about written. So
Correct.
Yep. Bullet C is about written materials, but we're not in that section.
So I can put a definition I'll pull a definition for defamation and put that.
What you have is probably fine. I mean, because defamation is an umbrella, and then
Right,
under
so it's-
defamation is libel, which is written.
So it's
and-
written,
You
written
need
or
to job
spoken.
published. For
Right, libel is published. So defamation, we would say spoken
Yeah.
or public, or published.
Yeah,
Aren't we then just talking about slander?
slander is
Slander is spoken.
verbal, and
I'm
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
so if you're going to go libel, it's slander. They're both,
right. That's why I would use
Right,
defamation.
that's why we're going to go
which
with
is the-
defamation.
so you're going to take libel out.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Everyone okay with that? Jeff?
Yeah, I assume we'll have a definition of defamation, then
Yes,
libel and slander.
yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
And school code actually does just define defamation.
And then if we go all the way back to the beginning, the new definition on protected expression. So this is 1C. Should it be an or in the first line? So expression that does not materially or substantially interfere
Yes, did I say and?
Yes, it says and.
Sorry, it should be or.
And then I think we just need to change the tenses, so it would be
I already-
expression, you don't, okay.
Yeah, I already did on the Google Doc. Because as I was reading it,
Yeah.
I realized the tenses were incorrect. It's a skill I have.
He was an English teacher.
Okay, any more comments? Anybody else on the board about this particular policy? Okay. We'll move that forward, and our next first reading.
The next is 225, relations with law enforcement agencies. The genesis of this policy is really the safe schools reporting that we have to do every year. So every other year, we have to collaboratively put together a memorandum of understanding that's an agreement with the local police, so the Upper Dublin Police Department, that articulates guidelines for when law enforcement will actually be used in our schools. So as it happens, by June 30th of this year, we have to renew our memorandum. So I just changed there, the superintendent or designee shall be responsible to develop the memorandum of understanding. And then in 2B, where it says following procedures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I think we should just, like, where it says per Pennsylvania law, I think we can stop there, because per Pennsylvania law, that really is the safe schools reporting.
I have a question for you.
And then, I'm sorry, and then in guidelines, there's some gender language, so 3C, it would say performance of their duties, so that we don't include gendered language in the policy. I'm sorry, Mr. Kessler.
So you took out superintendent's designee in the top, but without it, to me, it's like, well, whose designee? Is it your designee or the board's designee? Because it says the superintendent, as you change it, it says the superintendent or designee. But it doesn't say who, like, who's got the authority to make the designation?
Haven't we been changing?
Yeah, I saw that somewhere else, and it
Yeah.
still
Okay.
struck me as like, it still to me is odd that we're, because it's,
So, we could say the superintendent or superintendent's designee. I mean, that's a non-substantive change that I can go back and put that.
But I think you're right to ask the question, but I think I'd prefer it superintendent or designee. In the absence of the superintendent for some, we need to be able to, we, the board, should be able to designate a substitute. So it's just safer to have superintendent or designee.
doesn't say it's the board's designate, it just says or designate, doesn't say who's
There you-
designating it. It's open to, it doesn't say that
It
the
could be,
board
you know,
is the
just
board.
random citizens designee.
No, but it doesn't say it's the board's designate. I mean, if you're writing a policy and you're looking to close loopholes, you're opening a hole here, because it's like, well, does the board have the authority to make the designate? It doesn't say so.
Fair
So,
point.
I mean, you
Yeah.
could say the superintendent or board's designate if you want, but, I mean, I think if you take it out, you're creating an
Right,
opening.
and we
that doesn't-
probably, I think it's a fair
Right.
point. We
It's
probably need to
super-
revisit
so,
that in every
yeah,
policy.
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect to the board, this needs to be me or my designee. That needs to be.
Okay. All right, and let's take the opportunity to search for the word designee across
I
our
just did.
policies. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them, I bet.
It's worded the way it is here. That doesn't mean we don't change
No, and
it,
that's,
but
and that's,
it's
and that's a
worded like this.
non-substantive change because the intent behind all of this is the superintendent or the person that I designate. So I take responsibility for the MOU because I'm the liaison to the police. When I was in New Hope, my liaison was my director of student services. So that person would be my designee.
Yeah, so in the other policies, it is worded the superintendent or designee. It doesn't say or superintendents. Again, it doesn't mean we don't change it, but I did check, and it's consistent with this revision.
We can add that to the list of summer work to do, to go through and change all of those.
Are we required to do it every other year?
Every other year.
Should you put that in there? Did I miss it?
We have it consistent with applicable law.
Okay, with the law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments? Jenna?
So we took out, because it was, I think, in the, is it in the authority section? No.
about the cooperative relationship?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I don't know whether it's worth putting something back in here about, obviously, I think it's I think it would be my directive anyway, that we want to cooperate with law enforcement authorities. So I don't know whether we want to put anything like that kind of back in.
I think it goes in the MOU. Doesn't that language?
I would
mean, we have
imagine
to
the
approve-
MOU is a little more granular than that.
The MOU is really technical. It's like what
Yeah.
things you call the police
Right, but
for.
there's a heading section. I mean, there's an opening, and we have to approve the MOU. So we can, isn't that where we would say that we value a collaborative relationship?
To me, it feels like a high-level policy governing principle that we want our superintendent to cooperate with authority. And it was in here before, kind of in that authority, at least it was,
Yeah.
It was in the
yeah.
purpose statement.
Yeah, so that's why I just
Well,
felt like.
It was in both, it was in
Yeah,
both.
it was in
Um,
both.
Yeah, I mean, so you're saying the board wants to direct the superintendent to maintain a collaborative relationship with the police?
And willing to cooperate with investigation, obviously, not that I'm worried he wouldn't, but as we always say, we're writing this not
Yeah.
for Steve, but for,
We already have language here that says that district employees shall not interfere with a law enforcement official in the performance of their duties. So, I mean, we really need to say, too, we're going to cooperate too. I mean, we're saying, don't interfere, so by not interfering, you would be cooperating.
I think those are different, personally. I think you can not interfere, but also not necessarily be cooperating, but I get your point.
I'm open to it if if we, the board, want to direct that we believe the nature of the relationship should be collaborative. I mean, that's not really policy language, but if we can come up with policy language that says that for the second reading, I'm open to it.
I like positive working relationship. Cooperative, I don't like the word cooperation. It almost puts, it's not clear who's in charge.
I don't like cooperative either because there are times that the police department might want us to do something that we're not required to do by law, but they want us to do it. And I think if we say cooperation and we don't do those things, then we're not really being cooperative. So like I have a monthly meeting, a standing meeting with the police chief. I can work on some language about a productive working relationship.
I take your point. I think that's a fair one.
You need a mic?
I would just leave it out. I think once you start going down the road about defining what kind of relationship you're going to have with law enforcement, I mean, obviously, we have a relationship with them. I think trying to characterize it just takes you on a rabbit hole.
Well, I would assume that sometime this month, we're going to see the first draft of the MOU. The MOU comes from the district attorney's office, so it's not something that we necessarily generate, right? We can add to it. We can't take away anything. Before this comes back for a second reading, I would assume actually within the next 2 weeks, we'll see the first look at that MOU. Let's see if there's any changes there that talk about a cooperative, or not a cooperative, a productive, or a positive, a working, a healthy, positive, productive, reciprocal relationship. I don't like reciprocal either.
Any more comments on this policy? No? Okay. We will keep working on that, move it forward. And our next first reading.
The next first reading is 226 searches. Almost all of this language was in the administrative regulation, not in the policy. Searches are very rare in Upper Dublin, but as I believe it's Mr. Sirota a couple times has said in the past, when you have to do something, it's good to be able to point to some language to say, here's why we have to do what we have to do. And although I would not change the administrative regulation, that doesn't mean another superintendent wouldn't. So what I did was moved some of that language that's shaded out of the administrative regulation and brought it over to the policy. I did think it was an important enough point that in the section about general searches as well as student-specific searches, that we are very clear that students' physical bodies may not be searched by district personnel. So we might ask kids to empty their pockets, open their purse, open their book bag, but we would not do a pat down or anything more than a pat down of students. That's something that, quite frankly, is out of the scope of district personnel and would need to be taken care of by local authorities. So to that point, in 3A1, is that a Romanette? That's a Romanette. So in 3A, Romanette 1, no, I'm sorry, number 2, the search may not be overly intrusive. I think we should also add there, students' physical bodies may not be searched, or shall not be searched by district personnel. And then in B, student-specific searches, between Romanette 5 and 6, students' physical bodies shall not be searched by district personnel. That's all consistent with moving all of this language to the policy is consistent with our peer districts, what their policies look like. There is a special call out for recording devices used for surveillance, and I just want to remind everyone, policy 709 is the building security policy that we talk about, cameras. 810.2 is recording on buses, and just as a reminder, building security is video, and bus is video and audio, just for everyone's edification. The word electronic was misspelled in the policy in C, so we took care of that as well.
I just have two thoughts. And for people watching at home or listening, this is totally driven by the events that occurred in Michigan this past year in Detroit. One, I think under 3B, I refuse to say Robinette. You said it. I said it as a negative. I think we should specifically add the phrase backpack or book bag to it. Because you talk about their self, locker, motor vehicle, or other belonging. But I think we should specify that because that's something they're carrying around. And then I have a question which relates to the last part of this, which we were talking about searching the student's body, right? And you said, okay, we can ask the student to empty his pockets or her pockets. What if the student, though, is carrying an object in their waistband, in the small of their back? Like, and it's, you're looking at a student in front of you, and it's evident to you something's going on.
That's when we would call for an officer to come.
A police officer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not comfortable, going any further than emptying pockets and opening belongings, And so, again, these things, we're very fortunate because these things are rare. But if there was ever that concern, we would actually call for an officer to come over.
Any other comments on this? I'm happy that you're adding all the explanation of search, because maybe I've watched too many TV shows, but right away I went to that a pat down or something. So it's not that, it's going to be in there, it's clear.
And then our last policy for this evening is 227, substance abuse. If you, Mr. Wallach pointed out earlier today, to delegation of responsibility. So 2G, it says reporting of incidents of possession, use, and sale of controlled substances, including alcohol, by any person on school property has to be reported to the Office of Safe Schools. That really needs to say student because this is a student-driven policy. And then under guidelines, 3A, along with prohibited conduct, we want to add that students will be referred to the Student Assistance Program. Mr. Wallach also pointed out that this policy really feels more like a controlled substance policy. I still want to move forward in the form that it's in We may bring this back this winter when another policy update comes out from PSBA, because if you remember last year, they talked about combining like the drug and alcohol policy, so you have one umbrella policy with several administrative regulations. This may wind up falling under that. I'm just not sure at the moment what they're going to recommend. But I don't think there's anything in here right now that I'm not comfortable with.
Comments, Jeff?
Yeah, just so everybody can understand my thinking, I mean, the issue I raised with Dr. Yanni about this policy was that it's entitled substance abuse, and it largely talks about controlled substances, but we do talk about alcohol in here. And I went and looked, and interestingly, this is the student alcohol policy. I mean, we have broader alcohol policies as to guests on the property and things like that. But to have one in the student section is this. So I'm okay with that. I was just kind of going back and forth because we have a separate policy on tobacco for students. We don't on alcohol, but alcohol's in this. I mean, I think we should move it forward because this is a very important policy. The title to me is a little bit of a misnomer calling it substance abuse, even though alcohol is a substance. But interestingly, we talk about controlled substances in the definition and then prohibitive items. So my long-winded way of saying, I'm good with this, with the recognition that we may at some point come back and reformulate this, the tobacco policy and alcohol policy, et cetera. But I think there's two changes I would then propose. One is in 2B, under delegation of responsibility, we talk provide education concerning the dangers of abusing controlled substances. Should we add or other prohibited items under this policy? Because we do make prohibited items broader than controlled substances. And controlled substances, in my mind, is like the DEA definition of a controlled substance, opiates or what have you. And then to that point also in 2G, we talk about reporting of incidents of possession, use, and sale of controlled substances, including alcohol. I don't know that alcohol is a controlled substance, so maybe we should say controlled substances and other prohibited items. That way we latch onto the policy definition as well. My thoughts.
So you have a much narrower, it sounds to me like you have a much narrower definition of controlled substances than I read it with, because I didn't go and look at how the law defines the term, which maybe I should have now, I'm thinking. But I was thinking that alcohol for minors is a controlled substance, is a prohibited substance. But maybe all we need is a definition here to resolve that difference. If you define controlled substance to include controlled substance for the purpose of this policy to include alcohol and paraphernalia associated with 1, 2, and 3, maybe that covers all of your concerns by just defining it to include it.
I'm just not sure, Mark, and we really should look at like a legal definition. I'm not sure that alcohol is truly a controlled substance. Yes, it's illegal for it to be used, possessed, et cetera, by someone under the age of 21, but I don't know if that makes it a controlled substance in the...
Right, it might not. That's what I'm saying, but we
Yeah.
can define it for this policy as being such.
But then I also think we need to think about other controlled substances then. So, I mean, I guess where I was in making this, kind of leaving the definition of controlled substances as a subset of prohibitive items kind of worked for me, so long as we used the term prohibited, why can't I say that word tonight, items elsewhere, so that we don't make the policy just about controlled substances.
I'm looking here on the DEA website. It does not appear at my first look that it's a controlled substance. So if we want to call it a controlled substance locally, we can, or we can expand the definition, or I can put it both ways and then we can look at it in second reading.
Does the ATF define it as a controlled substance? It's just, you said DEA, but I'm thinking that whether the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms defines it as controlled substance, since we're looking at documents on Google.
Is this for sport tonight?
That's next meeting.
I will certainly take a look. I'll certainly take a look. And next time I'll remember when we're talking about alcohol, tobacco, or firearms to look at the ATF website.
I also, I don't want to lose Jeff's question about the relationship between prohibited substance and substance abuse either. I don't think those two are the same things. If we're addressing substance abuse in a student, because this is a student policy, I feel like that's a little bit different than how we handle a student who has possession of controlled substances. It's a support question versus a legal question. And so our reaction may be different. And maybe that's why this was originally called substance abuse, because it was more about how we will support the student as opposed to how we will handle the legal possession question. So maybe it's two policies, maybe we need to cover both, but I don't want to lose that. I think it's an important distinction.
I don't disagree, Mark, and I think that as I read this policy, it really has both prongs in it. And adding, as Dr. Yanni said, the student assistance program really supports that education and abuse prong of it, but there's also parts of this policy that talk about the prohibitions as well, so.
But the student assistance program is one sentence at the bottom of a sub-bullet. If this is really about substance abuse,
But
it seems like burying the lead a bit.
I mean, in 2B, we do direct the superintendent to prepare rules to provide education for the dangers of abusing controlled substances. So, I mean, maybe we can think about a better title for the policy just so that it's all captured in the title.
And Mark, are you saying that someone might be caught with a substance, but they don't actually need to be referred to the student assistance program?
Or vice versa.
So that would break it up into two different policies. If the vice versa would. The vice versa definitely sounds like a whole nother policy, because they haven't been caught with anything, so how would you even know they need to be referred? But the title is what's making that. So if we change the title, this becomes more about when known to administrators that they have substance, and then they're referred to the student assistance program, and then at that point, would that program determine or uncover if there is a need for? So we wouldn't have to say we can refer them to this program. The program will then decide.
Correct.
Okay. So basically, we need a change in the title, possibly another, is that what you're saying, Mark? A change in the title of it, possibly another.
I'm honestly not sure what I'm saying. I think I'm saying, I think this should at least be split into two sections. I think there's a support. The board is expressing that if a student needs help with substance abuse, that the district shall make a referral, shall do that. And then the board also needs to have a policy about how we handle discovery of prohibited materials.
So I think there's actually 3 sections, right? So I think there's proactive education,
Yeah.
right? That's one, and this can all be in one policy. The proactive education, what happens, how do we respond when we think there is the use? And then what's that referral process if Those two sections are more, I still want to break them up into two sections because I think we can put in here that they're referred to the student assistant program. And that's really where the policy stops in. It's a student assistance program, then through that process, outcomes and recommendations would come. But that's not really a policy thing. That's more individualized to each student. So I'll revise the policy into 3 sections. Once I have those 3 sections, I'll give it a new title that is encompassing all of those 3 titles, and then we can look at it in second reading.
Okay. So that is it for our first readings today.
Jen, sorry, real quick. I do have I have 2 other small things on this, sorry. So 1B, Romanet 3. I had to read this a couple times, this is the section about anabolic steroids. Can we just kind of reorder the wording a little bit? So can we say, so anabolic steroids except, skip over the for a medical purpose, I'll come back to it. So except as prescribed by a licensed healthcare provider, and then do for a valid medical purpose, which does not include bodybuilding, muscle enhancement, et cetera. Like it was a little choppy, so that, again, I just had to read it a couple times. My other comment is on Romanet 5. Why are we not including paraphernalia associated with alcoholic beverages? Is there any reason we're doing just 1, 2, or 3?
Why are we including paraphernalia for the first 3? It's not being used. Why is that a problem? Yeah. I mean,
I don't think we want people bringing syringes onto school property, do we?
well, syringes are a weapon, or, that's a different story, but, a pipe.
To me, it's a slippery, I just don't want any of it, like, none of it.
I am not okay with it, but I have a hard time justifying prohibiting it.
Well, and paraphernalia, that's not like a T-shirt, like,
It's not disruptive.
But it can be. Doesn't it create a conduit? I mean, if somebody walks into school with a bong, the obvious use is the obvious use. I mean, to me, it just creates the opportunity that we don't want to have created.
I get what you're saying, Mark. As a technical matter, I mean, again, I'm not a cop. I don't know if you can technically arrest somebody just for having a pipe. Probably not. I just don't want it in my school, like where my kids are. So that's, for me,
I
it's
mean,
a
I guess we do
hard
have the right to make whatever policies we want.
line. Right.
I'm actually going to look at the MOU because I think there's a lot of language about paraphernalia in there. So then I think what we should do is mirror that language here, and I think that will hopefully satisfy the varying points.
yeah, because it's a little vague, paraphernalia.
It is, yeah. But I mean, I do think it should include for alcohol as well.
Which is what?
I don't want to reveal too much about my college life, Mark, but there is paraphernalia associated with alcoholic beverages. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Are we talking about a bottle opener? Like what exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm at. I mean, a still? I mean, what?
A funnel,
Said too much.
I mean,
No judgment at this table.
Some of those things can be found in the chemistry lab.
Okay, any more? We will work on the definition, I guess, paraphernalia, and take it from there. Okay, so that takes us up to public participation. If you would like to comment on anything that we talked about tonight, please state your name and where you reside in the township, and you have 4 minutes. Seeing no one approaching, we will close public participation. And our next meeting will be immediately following the education meeting. I don't have it written down. It's on here. February 1st, thank you. That's why you're vice. That's right. Immediately, February 1st, immediately following the education meeting, and we are adjourned.